All right, I got it. I don't know why it would. All right, we're live, folks.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to a working meeting of the City Council. So tonight, we're going to be focusing on a single topic. The budget is due to the City Council in about a week and a half, and so the staff has been working very hard on the budget. So some items need to be discussed so they know how to complete the budget. So we're basically going to be talking about fees tonight, city's current fee structures on things. So why don't we start, I guess, Amanda and Oneida, why don't we start with you two with the clerk's office? You muted. Oh,
Yep.
there you go.
Gotcha. All right, so we're gonna start with the history of the fees. I'm just gonna try to share my screen real quick and go ahead and pull that up for you guys. All right, and can you guys see that? Yep. Okay, awesome. So the history on the fees, and these are just the past few years. I know that in 2014, all the regular mercantile license fees, these are just normally the businesses were raised, and in 2016 is when all the contractor fees were increased. Throughout time, I know that, and especially recently, our last license fee renewal, it was a little bit difficult for the business owners to go ahead and just pay up for the mercantile license fee due to COVID, due to a lot of businesses being restricted. But you normally, when discussion with Dave and with Amanda, we normally go from 8 to 12% of increase. When we do increase, that is a percentage that we go by. And in the other, but this is normally just throughout the years ordinances where they are located on the fees and the increases. Aside from that, I'll go to the next one. These are the 8 to 12% of increase from when we do increase. That is the percentage that we go. And these specifically are just for our businesses, and it's broken down by the type of business. It's also the ones in red are our contractors. They're the ones that are GCs, home improvements, and depending on what specifically they do, it's a 2-year license. And again, the increases are either by 8, 10, 11, or 12%, and so forth. And I know that I want to go ahead and pass over the mic to Amanda. She can better explain the mercantile licenses. She is the main clerk that addresses them. So hold on, I'll mute myself.
Okay. Oops. Hi, everybody. In terms of the mercantile fees, especially for the businesses here in town, they're broken down by category, whether it's restaurant, market, health club, so on. The different types of fees, the way they're broken down, sometimes are based on the size of the business as well. Let's see, I'm just trying to see if there's, it's been pretty uniform over the years. In terms of even with the increases, they've been marginal to reflect the changes in the economy and what we've been doing to try to move forward and keeping up with some of the other towns and villages. And most our licensing year for the mercantile goes from December 1st through November 30th of the next calendar year. And we charge a late fee of $25 if the application comes in after the deadline. And that's pretty uniform with the businesses. The only exception to that are the seasonal businesses like our ice cream shops that are only open during the summer to early fall, where they just pay their standard mercantile fee, unless for some reason they open up and have failed to apply in time. That's when a mercantile fee is incurred, the late fee is incurred.
this is Liz. Can one business have more than one license?
Yes, some businesses where if it's a, for example, a nail salon, a hair salon that also does nails, they fall into two categories. Not only the hair portion, but the nail salon portion. Or if it's a, trying to think of another prime example of that, of, well, yeah, it could be. It could be like the new delis that's opening up where it's not only a market, but there's also a separate restaurant in there that may be under another license name for the same location. So they would incur 2 mercantile fees.
Thank you.
No problem.
Amanda, I had a quick question. I see that
Certainly.
there's a demarcation that a lot of these licenses are 2-year licenses. Are there any other durations for licenses?
For a majority of the local businesses, it's the 1 year, like I said, the mercantile year, December 1st to November 30th. It's only our contractor licenses that are a 2-year license. And it depends on the type of contractor and when they renew. For example, our home improvement contractors are every 2 years, expiring in March 31st. Where our GCs are April 30th. Plumbers are May 30th, and so on. So it depends on what the type of contractor that they are, and it's a 2-year license. But if for some reason they come in the middle of a licensing period, they still pay the 2-year value, but it's only to the extent of the licensing period. It's not like they get 2 years from the date that they come in.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Amanda, Mike Delory. If a home improvement contractor currently comes in and wants a license, he would be paying $300 this year?
That's correct. In fact,
and
because
nothing the following year.
Right.
So
So that
the cash
300
flow
covers them for the next 2 years until their license expires. So currently, the ones that renew now, that are renewing now currently will expire in March of 2023.
So for budgeting purposes this year, Ina would know how many would be renewable this upcoming fiscal year.
Well, it also depends on the contractor if they actually come in. So it's
Right.
not a standard number. It's kind of fluid depending if they're like returning on time with their applications. Sometimes we get new applications depending on the type of construction coming into town and so on.
But if everything remained the same with nobody new, you would have some that have already prepaid last year for 2 years and they don't have to pay anything this year.
That's correct.
Okay. And for budgeting purposes, Ina would need to know that to put it in the budget, which ones don't have to pay.
Then I would have to refer to Dave on that.
Can I jump in there? It's worked out. We're at the point we've had this system for long enough where it's about 50-50, where 50% will do this year and 50% will do next year. Slight variation. I think the variation more is dependent on how many transient. We get a lot of contractors who come and do one job and don't come back.
Come back again. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I just didn't know how much of a.
But it's usually approximately 50-50.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
What you have to keep in mind, though, is that if their license expires March 31st, they will be paying the old fee until the next meeting, until you approve the new rate.
Yes.
Well, just looking at the information, I mean, we haven't raised any of these fees in 5 years now, and clearly our expenses have gone up over that same period. And the amounts we're talking about here are, quite frankly, you're looking at most of them are $10 or $15. You know, some of them for 2 years, $10 or $15 spread out over 2 years. So it's not like we're this is being at all unreasonable. Like I said, especially since we haven't raised anything in 5 years, while our expenses clearly have gone up over that time.
One thing, if I may, the reason I had suggested the 10% is during the last renewal period, we did get some pushback from some of the business owners that, hey, your fees are too high, we can't afford it, and such. So I had originally was thinking more in the lines of a 20%, but I kind of scaled it. I kind of balanced it out to this.
Well, yeah, but if you look at it solely on a percentage basis, you know,
So this-
20% sounds intimidating, but if you're talking about $20 for a contractor for a 2-year license, that's nothing. So, you know, we got to put some perspective to this. You know, it's not just about the percent number. It's like, what's the actual increase? And these are, quite frankly, these are granted, I mean, now's a tough time for businesses, but these are still token amounts and they haven't changed in 5 years. So,
Dave, this is Liz. When I know with this, we're just talking about fees, so this question is just an extra. Does a business pay for a county license as well as a state license?
Depends on the business.
Okay, so can you just give me an example?
Well, the biggest example is the home improvement contractors.
Okay.
We require a license for them to for home improvement contractors to operate here. And one of the prerequisites is that they have to get the county license. And I believe our requirement for a home improvement license predates the county ever licensing them.
Thank you.
No problem.
Dave and Amanda, how do you distinguish office? In other words, there's so many different types of offices. If you flip the page, you see office and there's a fee. There are law offices. They're all different types. Real estate office, regular office. How do you?
That's just a regular business office. Law offices and real estate offices are generally licensed by the state, and we don't touch them. But that's just a kind of a catch-all for any other office type business.
So a law office or a real estate office,
Would
even
not
though
be
they're
included
licensed
here.
by the state, they have to pay the
Yeah,
state licenses.
They
like
wouldn't be
CPAs.
included here. This would be if you have, the general, we have offices that do, I'm just trying to think general business, like, Amanda, maybe you can help me out on one.
For example, something like Bridgeworks. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Right. Or we also have a couple of people who do like online sales and they just manage it out of their office here, off their office space here in the city.
Right.
Things of that nature.
I mean, we have ad agencies, insurance.
No,
brokers.
that's electronic.
You got the full spectrum.
Yep.
Okay.
I guess another thing just worth noting is, like I said, we haven't raised these fees in 5 years, which we can't say about taxes. So if our businesses aren't paying their fair share, it falls on the residents to make up that difference, and that's not fair to the residents. So, I mean, this is just, we got to keep up with inflation and how our expenses change. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none. Anita, Amanda, thank you very much. This was quite the list you put together here.
You're very welcome.
So we really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, why don't we move on to
On Tuesday?
what's that?
We're adding this to the agenda on Tuesday?
Yeah, we can do that. Well, yes, I think we can, and then everybody could vote and have their say. Why don't we move on to the buildings department? So I guess that's going to be Mindy.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. I was asked to gather information from local towns and communities, our neighbors, and see what rates they charge on some of our most common building permit fees and our zoning application fees. So it sounds like it would be easy, but not always is. Not everything's on websites. Like our website doesn't show anything. So, between phone calls, checking e-codes, going on websites, I got some numbers, and Oneida can put my spreadsheet up. You could see my dog is getting yelled at. I apologize. Okay, so I got numbers from Freeport, Rockville Center, Town of Hempstead, North Hempstead, Lawrence, Atlantic Beach, and Cedarhurst. And in our Long Beach column, the first thing that I will say stands out to me is how some of these fees have not been touched for 25 years. So you can see right there for the C of O, we've been charging $100 for 1 and 2 families. Freeport, $150. Town of Hempstead, $250. Cedarhurst, $200. So in red is a recommendation that was made by the building commissioner. The zoning fees have remained the same since 2002. Some of those we are much lower than other surrounding entities. So the red numbers were recommendations of where we should bump. And like I said, when you just mentioned it, John, the same thing with Mercantile. We haven't touched them for 5 years. Well, some of these, most of these are really old. So I don't, it's up to you, obviously, but it seems like it would be about time to bump these a bit. And that's really all I can speak to. You can see what some of our neighbors are charging. And nothing was really bumped too high at all. But that's your choice. If you feel that we should go a little higher in some things or use these recommendations. And then I will write a code change for the next meeting tomorrow. And remember, for April 6th, there will be publication only, same thing with Mercantile. And then it could get adopted on April 20th way in time for, next year, for July 1.
Well, thank you for putting this together. This is very, very helpful. Especially gives us other municipalities to benchmark ourselves against. Clearly, it looks like we are, in most of the categories, are way below everyone around us. And to your point, if we haven't changed these in 20 years.
And 25, the first year in 1996.
Right.
And in 91 for plumbing fixtures, that's 30 years.
Yeah.
So right there, just as a normal consumer, I wouldn't be, you'd say, well, I guess it's about time the city of Long Beach did some, changed it. It's one thing if we did it. What? You're welcome.
John and Mindy, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you take out a building permit and it's good for a year?
I'm not all familiar with the building department rules, but I know a permit has an expiration date. I think it is for 1 year.
Okay, let's assume now that I was interested in charging a fee for a building permit that goes beyond the
I,
one year. Is
I
that
think-
anywhere in here?
no, it's not listed. It's in the code.
It's
I
in the
think that
code.
It exists in the code where somebody wants an extension.
Because
And
I would,
it's a minimal fee.
here's what I want to run something by you. The renewal fee of a permit after 1 year, 25% of the original permit, good for 6 months.
I couldn't tell you exactly what it is. Scott would best, would know that answer in a heartbeat.
And here's the reason why.
Okay.
Other municipalities do it. It expedites construction without delay. It can penalize somebody for just waiting and leaves a half-finished building, sometimes not what the neighborhood is looking for. So I know other municipalities do it. I was hopeful that maybe we as a council could consider that. And I know it's not on here, but it's something that I'd like to see at least discussed at a hearing. That's all I have to say.
Mike, you were saying instead of it being a year, how long should it be? The
Well,
recommendation?
let's just talk about a single family house, Donna. They're giving a permit to whether it's a home remodel or a major construction. And this is up to discussion. After the first year of the building permit being issued, there's a 25% fee, good for 6 to 12 months or whatever you decide. That would encourage construction to be completed, closed out, and done. It also prevents people who decide to delay without, and I'm not talking about New York Rising or things in the past now. We understood what was going on with that. But there are people that take out permits that just go on and on and on, and it's not fair to the neighborhood that they're in. So my suggestion would be that a building permit is good for 1 year, and there's a fee to renew it at 25% of the original permit. And that's good for 6 months or 12 months, whatever the council decides. Or you might table this whole idea. And after 2 years, it goes to 50% of the original permit. So the permit renewal extension escalates in the hopes of this building being closed out. And it's not unique. It's done in other areas.
Okay, so Mindy, can we look into that and see how other municipalities escalate that? So then we could add it to, because only thing we would notice on Tuesday is a hearing. So
Right.
we can come back and discuss that, and we would have some information to compare it to.
Okay.
Thanks. Is that okay, Mike?
Oh, that would be perfect. If Mindy needs some assistance finding some of this information, I'd be happy to, help her as well.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
So I'm just scanning the fees here. Even with if we raise these, we're still in many cases below folks around us.
Right.
So in other words, residential variances, we're still pretty much below almost everyone. Conditional temporary variances, we'd still be way below everyone. Off-street parking would still be below everyone. So do we want to think, I mean, I guess I'm going to guess this was an issue of not wanting to cause too much sticker shock.
Correct. I think it was about being reasonable and not,
Yeah.
yes,
So
not having.
maybe this is something more the lines, if we do that this year, then we need to look at it maybe annually or every other year, you know, to make more incremental adjustments.
Right, not wait 20 years. Is what
Not
you're
wait 20, right. But we need to make more incremental adjustments to keep up with inflation and changes in expenses and things like that.
I think that, John, it's Liz, I think that's a great point. And to what Mindy just stated, I mean, this has not been looked at in 30 years. Again, we're looking at something and making it right.
Yeah, I know, John, since it hasn't been done in 20 years, you know, and I'm not suggesting this, but if you look back what you may have paid in 2002 or 2005, and don't look at the percentages of what you would pay today for certain like real estate and related costs, it's far beyond any of these type of increases, percentage-wise. I'm just saying that if you're thinking of increasing it now and going forward annually, that's great. So we just have to target what we think would be appropriate today and then maybe build in over 5 years.
Well, I mean, look, this is sort of like all these new policies that we've been passing, where, you know, we have that statement at the end that this needs to be reviewed annually and adjustments made accordingly based
Right.
on, you know, new conditions. To that point, I think it seems like historically, unless someone takes it upon themselves to go and review these things, we generally don't have a set schedule where we go and take a look at these things and make adjustments for inflation and you know, the city's expenses and things like that. So, and again, I keep coming back to the same theme. When these gaps grow bigger in these other areas, then they have to be made up somewhere else, and that's often in people's taxes. And so again, we can't be burdening one group because we're not making appropriate adjustments elsewhere. So,
I mean, yeah, I think Mindy, I'm just looking at that since 1996, since 2011, since 1991. And Mindy, I greatly appreciate what you did. You laid it out very nice. It's easy to read. It's a very good chart, and it exposes a lot of what was needed in many past years. Had this been done, we wouldn't be that far behind. So I appreciate you doing this. You know?
Hey, John, it's Ron Walsh. Can I add a suggestion?
sure.
So the suggestion I kind of have is you have these fees that you're dealing with, and you want to bump them up, and you want to try and keep pace. You could consider a resolution that gets you to this level this year, and then you add 2% each year for the next 5 years in the same resolution, so you don't have to keep revisiting it every year. It increases the fees, and you can have the schedule so that the office knows what to charge each given year, and you're staying pace with inflation and with the added cost that the city has as employees are making more money and our expenses go up.
Right.
If you don't mind, I have also one thing to add. City council had adopted a revenue policy a couple of months ago. And what that revenue policy does, it actually tells us to revisit this on an annual basis on a rational basis. And I believe that annual review of all these things is reasonable. So that's something that I would plan to bringing up, maybe not to the same extent, but on an annual basis before the budget is proposed. That's the policy. For right now, it's a revenue policy.
And maybe this is a question more for Joe. Can you put in a resolution, can you kind of predetermine fee increases over a period of time in a resolution, or do they have to be done each time there's an adjustment made? Does that require its own resolution?
You know, I mean, depending upon the resolution, I mean, you can add it, but I think it would be a better practice if there was actually a contract in place to put it in a contract. With that said, there's nothing that states that a resolution can't be binding on agreements.
I would suggest that we, right now, because of the revenue policy, in our policy, we state we will look at it annually.
Yeah.
Our multi-year plan will say, give you a date on a year from when we pass the revenue policy, you need to look at all the fees. So if you want to do a resolution to say, we want it raised 2% every year for CPI or whatever, then we need to change the revenue policy. Otherwise, they will be in contradiction of each other.
Okay.
But you could review, Donna, with the, just to throw it out there, you could pass the resolution with the 2% increase and still review it to see if it's enough or you want to reduce it. So you could have a predictable value each year going into your budget.
We would have to adjust the policy.
The revenue policy.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And so for this year, what I would suggest is that we say right now we're reviewing it, we're following the policy. When we review it again next year, we can then change the policy to say we want to add 2% of CPI every year for the next X amount of years. That could be one of the recommendations. And then the policy and the resolution can change. Well, the resolution can be made and the policy can change.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else got any questions for Mindy?
John, I got one real quick thing.
Yeah.
I just brought up the code, and we do have, to Mike's point, section 746 sub F. The fee required for each extension request submitted for review shall be 25% of the total fees charged for the issuance of such permit, not less than $75, not to exceed $1,000. So that's the 25%. It looks like it is already in the code.
Thank you, Dave.
No problem.
But we will have to look at the code because it says not to exceed $1,000. So at some point we may have to exceed that. So
exactly
that needs to be looked at as well.
So that yeah.
In addition, each extension is only good for 90 days. So anything over a year, it's 90 days, and then you would have to pay for another extension fee.
Oh, so an extension's not a long extension, then they're short duration generally. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, John, and it just expedites construction, and it helps the neighboring community understand that they'll I'll just say, put the word, they'll put up with it knowing that it's going to be an end date. But if there's, you know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I could see that. Okay. All right. Well, Mindy, thank you very much. This was very, very useful and thought out. Made it easy to understand. So thank you.
You're welcome, John.
Okay. And
Will be added to the resolution as well?
yeah, I guess we can add that on there.
Okay.
Okay. And leave the recommended numbers, or did you want to bump any a little, or just leave them as they are?
Well, I think to your point, you know, we were trying to find that balance between making appropriate adjustments and not doing sticker shock. So,
Okay.
so maybe, I mean, I'm only speaking for myself here. So, you know, and then if the revenue policy is going to require us to look at it annually, you know, we'll start making annual adjustments to it.
Okay. Because, all right.
I know when I see the Freeport variance cost and the others, I think we are too low, even with the proposed increase, but that's my personal opinion. But I'll leave it at that. Where's Liz and Karen? Have they?
I have a question. So when we post it for Tuesday, we're just posting that we're having a hearing, correct?
Correct.
Well, yes, but we are putting the body, the verbiage of the actual code changed because people need to see it in order to participate in the hearing.
Okay,
And then if we want this done in a timely manner, we have the hearing on the night of the 20th and we can adopt it the same night. I mean, that's what we've been doing.
okay. So what's you all's pleasure? Do you want us to go back and look at increasing the fees more? Or do you want to let it be what it is, what she has done so far? And then we will look at it again for the next budget cycle.
I mean, I'm willing to share what I think with
Okay, I'm
whoever
listening.
wants to.
I'm listening, Mike.
No, I went through everything, and I think there's certain things that are, I would go higher.
Okay,
Because my biggest concern is if it's done, and I know there's a revenue policy, my concern is that not many people want to review and renew permit fees every year. So I would like a catch up to get us to the point of where I think some of it should be. I put a sheet together as far as just the variance section, with residential, new one family, new two family, commercial, new commercial alterations, new multiple dwelling, off-street parking, and such. So I'm willing to share it with other people, but I'm a little aggressive, put it that way. The plumbing fixtures are, in my mind, are way too low. But I guess I'm a little bit my experience has been I try to set it once and not have to deal with it, revisit it for a couple of years. But
Well, the problem we've had is it hasn't been revisited in many years. So
many years, I know.
Just out of curiosity, Mindy, what, since you did all the research, and like I said, I know you're trying to find that sweet spot balance. Do you think this is the sweet spot, or do you think nudging it a bit would be appropriate?
Well, if you want my opinion, the way I think about it is in 2002, for the zoning, what were people paying to build a house? And now what are they paying in 2021?
Right.
I mean, we know what houses are going for. When I see a house in the West End, a new raised house, that's $1 million.
Right.
Fantastic. That means we have people with some income and wealth that are coming into town. Doesn't mean we want to gouge people either, but to Mike's point, and I know social media's point, if all of a sudden we become the city that every year is raising fees, it's going to get thrown back in our face as well. So I guess this is your job as council members to decide what you think your constituents would be most pleased with. A little extra in the bump right now, and we let it sit for 2 or 3 years. Instead of, oh my goodness, they're going to do this to us every year. That kind of attitude. So,
no one has done it apparently since 2002. So
right.
And that's why my numbers,
dying.
that's why my numbers will seem very aggressive, but it's more comparatively realistic. And I'll give you an example, Mindy and others. Plumbing installations hasn't been raised since 1991. It's on the bottom of the sheet.
Mm-hmm.
So your first 5 fixtures is what, 90, proposed from 60 to 90? That's for 5.
I know.
I mean, if it was 100, that's $20 a fixture. It's, some people think that it's a lot. Comparatively, it's nowhere near what I think it should be for. Here's your first 5 fixtures. If they install 3 or 2 or 4, I think 60 to 90, I think at least it should be 100. But that's my personal point. Because I do know what others charge, and it's not on this list. That's why I'm just saying that. And since 1991. So I know.
Karen and Liz?
I prefer that we not do the sticker shock part and stick with the revenue policy since we adopted that, because this would make all of, as a policy, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that this doesn't happen again. And that the fees continue to go up as this city moves forward and things are fair.
I am, I think I just want to clarify that I don't think it's the city council's objective necessarily to gauge the population and determine their ability to withstand the increases. I think I personally defer to the finance team of the city to make the recommendations that they feel is best suited to the community. So I'm looking for their opinion.
And just to chime in, Donna, I agree with Karen and Liz, and also I'd like to hear more from Scott Kemmons, as he's the commissioner of the department. And I know he's unavailable tonight, but maybe since this is on for publication, it gives us a little opportunity to hear back from him.
Yes, and Scott has been going over these fees have been out there for a while, but we can't have Scott respond to them. He was fine with them. I agree we need to stay within the revenue policy and look at it every year. Maybe if we can go back and take another look at them and send you all an email before we have to publish the agenda, and we will decide as a team whether we go forward at the next meeting or the second meeting in April, if we need to come back and take a look.
And Don, I have one question for Ina is, when we do memorialize with the review as per the revenue policy, as from what I remember, we didn't particularly pick a date or a month or when it will happen, but I would assume it would happen January or February as we go into the budget cycle. The review. Well, Ina, what do you think is the...
Ask your question again, Mike. I'm sorry.
Ina, what month of the year do you think it's best to review these fee schedules?
You know what? I guess that's up to the council to decide. I think that January or February is good. Also, we're benchmarking it against other municipalities, right? So I'm not sure what those year ends are. Actually, what we're looking at was prepared, if I'm not mistaken, last fall or summer. Okay. This could have been outdated already. So I think January, February is it is a good time to start looking at them.
You'd want to get a good indication of what your budget realistic forecast would be. And I'm sure if you're putting other numbers together, you'd want to have it by at least February.
I agree with Mike. I don't think the council should decide the calendar. I'm looking for guidance from the administration to set up a calendar for the council to determine what we should be voting on at what time during the year. Because as you get new council members or different council members or different levels of interest, a new council member is not going to know that it's time to look at the fees. But if we had
Right.
a calendar that suggested that, that would be extremely helpful.
So when we passed all of the policies, remember I said we were going to set up a calendar so
Yeah.
that we would have, no matter who was in office, they would know at this time that these policies have to be reviewed.
Good.
The council will have to say, yes, these policies were reviewed, no changes, or you have to vote on the changes. And so that for all the public listening, you with that schedule also will be in the transparency portal so that any resident can say, by the way, did you all look at this particular policy? If we're going to look at changes of any fees, those actually will begin in the fall. So when we start the budget process in January, we will already know which direction we're heading in. So these fees, again, will be looked at because Mindy, who did an excellent job, I think, Mindy, we started looking at these in September, wasn't it? So September of 2021, we will look at these fees again and have them ready to go in the next budget for the 22, 23 budget. So the process begins long before January.
Donna, that is great. That is perfect. It's strategic leadership. It's setting us on the right path year in and year out. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. We do this as a team effort, right, everybody?
That's right.
All right. Anything else for Mindy? Questions? All right. Hearing none. Thank you again, Mindy. This was
Thank you.
very, very useful.
Thank you, everyone. May I leave now?
Yes. Go pet the
Okay,
dog.
thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
You too.
Take care.
All right. Let's see. I guess next, I think there was some a few comptroller office fees that we were going to discuss, correct?
Yes, I think it was the tax fax fee. Say that fast several times. And the delinquent fee, duplicate bill fee, those were only going up by $5. What I did write down was that we need to do a comparison. Because what we have on those fees right now, along with the Zoning Board of Appeals application filing fees, we have what they want to increase them to, but we don't have a comparison of what other municipalities charge. So we need to go back to do a comparison on those.
Okay.
So the only thing we have left is beach fees. If you all are ready to talk about that, we can. If not, we can just, that will be it.
Well, I guess we do have to figure those out as well, since we're trying to get the budget closed up. I mean, we talked about them quite a bit at the last meeting, working meeting. I mean, I'm just, you know, one of the things I've been looking at in here is, you know, we have a series of passes that we only charge $15 for the whole season. And in fact, I get one of them, the military veterans pass is only $15. I mean, some of these passes that are only $15 for the entire season. In the original proposal, we weren't touching those for some reason. And given now that we know that the beach is running at a pretty big deficit, I don't think it's unreasonable to bump those $15 ones up. So I'm not talking significantly, but even if we only bump them up $5 each, is someone not going to buy a beach pass over $5? You know, when they're only paying going from 15 to 20 for the whole season? They're still getting a pretty fantastic deal at $20 for the season.
I'd have to ask Joe, are those special prices based upon some agreement that was made that we can't raise the non-resident fee from the resident fee, that certain percentage?
No, basically the case law pretty much says that you're allowed to have a discrepancy between resident and non-resident fees. That's reasonable. I mean, in essence, a resident pays taxes, right? So those taxes go to the maintenance and whatnot of the facility, whatever it is. So that's why a non-resident beach pass can be more. There isn't, there isn't an exact mathematical, guideline, but, as long as it's reasonable, it's okay.
Joe,
Yes, Nina?
actually, we had this conversation maybe like 2 hours ago, right before the meeting, where I followed up on this inquiry of how did we come up with the formula of 200%, right? That the non-residents can only be charged 200% of what residents are. And I think, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, was it the city of Avalon in Jersey that where they had where it was found that the non-resident passes of $20 compared to the resident passes of 10 were constitutional?
That's 100% correct. The case that you're referring to was actually Gerwitz v. the city of Long Beach, and this is the city. This is the case back in the 70s where the city pretty much attempted via resolution and the code to ban non-residents from using the beach.
Restrict totally, right?
Yes,
It's not. It's my understanding. It was, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. That case attempted to quote unquote privatize Long Beach as a beach, whereas you couldn't. Where what we're talking about now is just distinguishing between a non-resident rate and a resident rate. And as far as I can tell, there is no restriction on the amount above the resident rate that a non-resident would pay. That's how I understand it.
It has to be reasonable, right?
It has to be reasonable, but now with that, I mean, in my research,
We define reasonable. I'm very unreasonable. I can tell you that.
Can we like, I just want to sort of refocus this conversation a little bit, if you can indulge me for a second. In 2019, military passes totaled 0.58% of the total revenue that we collected for the beach. Okay, so that's 25,000 out of 4.367 thousand. Okay. At the same time, non-resident passes, which were also $15, the same as the military passes, for probably sake of uniformity in terms of pricing, to make it simple, so that people could say, okay, this is how much this costs. In 2019, our non-resident daily passes garnered $2 million worth of that $4.3 million, or 46.89%. Okay.
Yeah, Karen, you're doing apples and oranges. The $15 for the non-residents is a daily pass. The $15 for the military is a season pass. So it's apples and oranges.
Okay, then I would like to say that I'd rather focus the conversation on the fact that the non-resident daily pass, which was almost 50% of our revenue in 2019, dropped by $1 million in 2020. So we lost $1 million. I think that's the focus of our conversation. Are we going to get an extra $50,000 from military families like you and my brother? Or are we going to focus on, really what's really the revenue drivers here? What are the levers to really get us the more revenue? And where is it going to?
It's all of the above, because adding, I did some quick math, adding $5 to the $15, and I'm talking the $15 season passes, not the dailies. The $15 season passes brings in another $50,000 or $60,000 for the season. And considering the deficit the beach has been running out the last few years, every little bit matters. The thing with the daily rate, you got to remember, you bump the price up, people may go elsewhere. You know, the Rockaways, which is some of the beaches down there are getting nice now and have amenities on the boardwalk that they didn't have a few years ago. The Rockaways are getting very popular and it's free to get on the beach down there. So,
and that's why, you know, Ina and I agree that, you know, well, I'll speak for myself rather, that I don't know if we're necessarily in a position to raise the non-resident rate, daily rate. I don't agree with raising it beyond $15 right now.
I don't think anyone here has discussed raising the daily pass rate.
But that's almost 50% of our revenue. Why aren't we talking about that?
Well, we have to remember though, last year, the reason our non-resident rate was so low is because they weren't allowed on the beach.
Right.
Yeah.
When we first started out, with everyone. We had to go to 50% capacity. So then it was residents only. And then we said, okay, we're going to bring in non-residents. Then we lost the 50% capacity. So we had to go back to residents only on the weekends, and non-residents can only come Monday through Thursday. That's why the amount was so low, because we weren't allowed for non-residents. You also have to remember that even with the Long Island Railroad, we didn't do that at all last year either, because of the 50% capacity. So really, if we want to compare apples to apples, we need to go to 2019 to compare it to what we're trying to do slightly in 2021, because as of right now, we're going to have to start the beach at 25% capacity.
And that's also assuming, and by the way, it's worth noting, we had decreased revenue because of the beach capacity limits, but we had 100% of the expenses.
Right.
The other thing that's worth noting is, even if we use 2019 as the baseline, because that was the last quote unquote normal summer, we still don't know yet what the executive orders are going to, if they're going to put any limitations on the beach this summer. We can cross our fingers and hope they don't, but we don't know yet.
So where is the revenue going to come from? Like, we're talking about $1 million gap, not a $50,000 gap.
Well, if you look at scenario 3 that I sent out, I think that gross is about a 5.5 million. But then we could modify that as others, you know, feel comfortable with.
Well, again, I mean, the simple fact is the beach runs at a loss, and it runs at a significant loss. We have to close that gap somehow, because again, if we don't close that gap, then the taxpayers are going to pick it up somewhere else. And quite frankly, if we get a significant revenue source from non-residents, we can bump theirs up.
I think earlier I said 25%. We do it at 50% capacity. And we have talked to, and maybe John McNally want to chime in, we have talked to another beach, and everybody right now is starting off at 50% capacity. You also have to remember, last year we had to bring the lifeguards in early because of COVID. We had to put lifeguards on the beach.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say nothing is finalized yet, and I don't know, my camera's a little bit off, but nothing is finalized yet. The state has not given us updated guidance, but the presumption that we are acting on, I mean, we're making sure that we are prepared for all eventualities, but the presumption that we are acting on is that the beach, at least for opening, will be at 50% capacity, which for our city will mean, you know, we don't have parking lots that we can block off. So it'll be where we ended last year, more or less. So it'll be the weekends are residents only. And we've learned our lesson from last year. Monday to Friday we will be allowing non-residents. So, you know, the presumption again will be that non-resident daily beach passes will be down if things hold true to where they currently stand. You know, we're going to be preparing for a more hopeful, we'll be ready for anything. If all of a sudden the governor says, similar to last year, the governor gave us a week notice to say you can open beaches, we'll be ready for a full opening. But the intimations and the inclinations that we're getting thus far is that we probably are going to be opening the beaches at 50% capacity again. And for us, that means the same situation we were in last year where, quite unfortunately, we just can't let on the weekends. We have to restrict it to residents only.
So if that's a repeat of last year where the beach will potentially be resident only on weekends, are we going to be selling non-resident seasonal passes if they're not going to be able to get on the beach on the weekends?
So under that scenario, it would be, so remember the first month that the beach is open for weekends only. And as we saw with COVID last year, and this is the driver of all things, by the time we got, through the month of May, into June, COVID was significantly reduced, and we were basically baselined the same way we were all summer long. So if in fact we are entering a third peak or a fourth peak, depending on whose numbers you're using for accounting, I think everybody is a lot more agile and a lot more prepared for where we were than last spring. And I'm talking state level all the way on down to Long Beach, obviously. I would hope, and I would imagine this council would advocate for, if the numbers in our community dictate that we would be in a position where we feel like it's safe to open a beach at 100%, that we would be able to open a beach at 100%. But the fact of the matter is the first month of our beach season, our beaches are only open and staffed with lifeguards on weekends. So we would be talking about potentially, residents only for those weekends. And then when we kick in, in June or July, and Joe will jump in and tell me the specific dates, if he's so inclined, then, we'll have to evaluate where we're at.
I would say let Joe jump in because, and thank you, John, for the update about the 50%, but Joe Brand is the Commissioner of Parks and Recs, and he has to be the one, and he was the one that will be held responsible in making sure that we follow the guidelines the way we should be following them. Joe, did you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the driving force here, like John just alluded to, and the conversations that we've had this week, both with the Long Island Railroad and with the electronic beach pass company, that the non-resident daily passes don't even become a factor until the end of June. June 26th, we open up 7 days a week. Right now, we've got to focus our attention on resident pass sales and where that leads us in terms of picking up where we left off last summer at 50%. Nothing changes to start the season. We have that grace period, I guess you'd call it, where we're weekends only, and it would be residents only unless the guidance changes between now and Memorial Day. So
can I ask a question? May I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you. So it seems to me that the non-resident revenue really is limited by two factors. One of them is the capacity, right? There are only that many non-residents that, given current rules and regulations from the state, we are anticipating at the beach. And another factor is the elasticity of this revenue, meaning that if we will raise it by $2, we'll lose people to Rockaways, like John said. Not even taking into consideration the 200% rule that we were following of non-resident being twice as much as resident, we can raise it by 500%, but in the context of looking at the next year budget, I don't really think that would contribute much into the budget, right? Because of, like I said, because of the capacity and the elasticity. So the second biggest contributor into the beach revenue is the resident family, right? And the resident family contributes about 30% of the total, a little bit more than that. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the category that has the most contribution factor, if that category will be changed, that's the one that will have the biggest impact on the overall revenue for at least the next year budget. So that's what I think that Karen was trying to say, that why do people rob banks? That's because banks have money, right? So that's where we want to go into the. Not that other categories should be neglected. I totally think that, it's up to you, obviously, all how you want to treat the others. But if we want to have a meaningful impact on the next year budget, and by the way, the results of this year operation, because that's not negligible. We lost a lot of money in July and August. So if we want to do that, we need to look at those categories that have the most impact.
Thank you, Ina, for helping me try to explain it, explain this. You had pointed out that in 2019, the resident family passes contributed 30% to the total revenue. But in 2020, resident family passes contributed 55% of the total revenue that we got last year. 55% of the total revenue for 2020 was from resident family passes.
But that's because we weren't selling passes to non-residents. That's why the number
right.
went up.
Right. So to finish, we're not necessarily going to be selling non-resident daily passes until the end of June. We're not sure of the capacity rules for the entire summer at all. So therefore, it suggests that the resident family passes contributed 30% in 2019 and 55% in 2020. That therefore, they are not going to go back to 30% of the total like it was in 2019. It's probably going to be more like 45 or 50%. Therefore, that is one of the two biggest levers in terms of increasing the total revenue that we are going to bring in.
So I just want to make sure I understand, because I think I do understand what you're saying, then those are the areas that we should look at raising the fees.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Thank you, Donna, for helping me there.
Oh, no worries. I just tried to make sure I understood.
Well, we still have the big unknown on what we're going to be able to do or not do with the non-residents, because in 2019, the non-residents actually brought in more revenue than the residents. So if we went back to a normal summer and we reverted to that, it would be the non-residents who would be the bigger revenue source than the residents. So unfortunately, not having guidance from the state yet on what we can do is throwing a big wrench in the monkey in the works here, because I guess this raises another question. If we have to go to a resident-only weekend type scenario again, do we need to create a non-resident Monday to Friday season pass?
That's a great question, John.
That's adjusted accordingly, since we're not letting them in on the weekends.
No, because we don't know what's going to happen. So why would you create another pass for Monday through Thursday?
Well, you would only sell that come late June.
Yeah, but in July they may change it.
See, that's why it's our responsibility to pass and for the city to deliver a responsible, conservative budget where revenue roughly equals expenses in terms of the beach. And that's why it's our responsibility to figure out a pricing schedule that is somewhere between 2019 and 2020 to get us to that total. It's not going to be 2019, unfortunately. It's not going to be 55% of the non-residents make up the total revenue like it was back then, unfortunately.
Okay, Ina, what do we show right now, if you have it in front of you, based on the revenue projections we have, what
I couldn't, but
is it like?
What did you say? Like your last part of the question was not heard, Donna.
Okay, the revenue minus the expenditures for this upcoming beach season in the next budget year, what are we looking at for the loss?
What are we looking for the loss? Just, yeah, I have it. I just need to open it up. Just give me 1 second, okay? Well, it looks like for 2021, if nothing will change, the city will lose this fiscal year, just this fiscal year, not the 2022, the city will lose $1.7 million. And for next fiscal year, the city will lose $1.3 million. You're gonna ask me how come less this year than the 2022? Because in my projection for 2022, I assumed that the following summer, right? Not this, but the following, the summer 2022, which will partially fall in that fiscal year, will be normal. Does that make sense?
Yes. They're
Yeah,
not.
so we're talking about millions of dollars.
Yes.
but basically we're running $1 million in the hole to run the beach, and we have to make it up. COVID or not COVID.
Or on the flip side, which may be a separate conversation, I don't know, or we have to look at if we have to make adjustments to beach operations.
That we have looked at that. We can go back and look at that. That's tough. Because one of the things that was suggested was that you close some of the beaches. You got to have lifeguards.
Right.
And so that's very costly there. And as the beaches get crowded, there are still people that are home. So when we look at what we may lose here is 1.7, we're assuming that the lifeguards will not come on duty full time in May. Because remember, they came on full time in May of last year or early June because people were home.
Right.
So we had to bring in people. So if you're talking about streamlining the beach activity, we really have to look at that.
And from a beach pass perspective, right now, you're looking at almost an identical footprint from what happened last summer in terms of pass sellability. I mean, because even if they open it up and say that we can have a 75% capacity, that's probably still only going to change the numbers Monday through Friday with non-resident daily passes. If we can't open at 100% on the weekends, we saw it in early July when we tried to open up. We're not going to be able to extend that amenity to non-residents. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things as we track the numbers, you know, with the virus and the positivity rate, you know, if we start to see this come down, you know, again, at the council's discretion, we've been, you know, as an administration, as a city, very conservative over the course of the past year. I think this is an area where, you know, again, at the council's discretion, we start to get aggressive of, you know, we know where this is going. We've learned our lessons from last year. We can operate a beach at 100% capacity safely, you know, if that's the council's wishes, and we can make a strong advocacy claim for that. It helps the economy, it helps the city, it helps our local businesses, you know, and we saw a baseline flat rate all summer long last year, you know, and one would assume the situation on the ground with vaccines coming online would change pretty drastically the equation overall.
This is Liz, just to get back to the fees itself, as this is a working meeting. The bottom line is we're going to raise resident fees. Yes? You don't have to vote. We're not voting. And we would like to put this on the agenda. Is that correct, Joe?
As Ina, yeah.
Who would answer?
Well,
that? The attorney?
I am talking purely from the mathematical standpoint, right? So basically, if we can only sell these tickets to the residents, right? So what are we going to accomplish if we're gonna raise non-resident fees for the budget? We can raise it to $100 for a day, but what if we're not planning to sell a lot of those? How will that impact the revenue? If we can't sell them, or people will not be buying them. So from the purely mathematical standpoint, it would make sense that raising residential, and in this case, residential family passes fees will have a meaningful impact.
I just want to say that this is hard stuff. This is tough, and none of us take it lightly. But the numbers don't lie. We can't run a beach in a deficit. And if I didn't truly review the numbers day in, day out with Ina and Donna and the team, and see that the numbers just don't work unless we raise fees, I wouldn't be behind it. And again, this is tough. I'm your neighbor. I have to see you on the boardwalk and on the beach. But I can tell you, after these a bunch of nice days, I can't wait to get back to the beach. And it was, it's just so beautiful, and we have to maintain it to the level of excellence that we have been. And I'm just so proud of how everything worked out last year, how the team pulled together in insurmountable circumstances. So just know that we're not taking this lightly.
And Joe, how many beach days are going to be in the season this year?
82.
So the highest proposed seasonal pass for the resident here is $120, divided by 82. And how many people can go from the family on the same pass?
It's 2 adults plus passes for any children that they have in their household between the ages of 13 and 17.
Yeah, so we're talking about really couple of cents, right, per day, per person. That's the magnitude. And I'm talking purely mathematical. I know that as a council, you have different pressures. So.
Well, I think we all agree that they have to be raised, but we just don't know to what level. Would that be fair?
I'll just note that it appears we've lost John Bendo.
Yeah, he's trying to get back home.
He's having a connection issue. I'm working with him right now.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, you were correct, Mike.
You know, you can think 82 days at $2 a day is $160. I mean, and they haven't been raised in 5 years. And I'm not the one that likes to raise rates, but when you do the numbers like Ina did and Karen did, I think we all conceptually agree that they have to be raised. It's to what level that we can make up a projected deficit that could be 7 figures. And we all love the beach. I mean, we all love the sunsets, and it's a small price to pay to live here. Some people think it's high. I think it's value, and I'll stake that on value. Welcome back, John.
Yeah, thank you. Zoom kicked me out and wouldn't let me back in. I think Dave hit the server with a sledgehammer or something to finally get it to work.
I threw a few rocks at it.
Of that is that we will go back, we will take a look, and we will.
Yes. So
email
then
everybody.
just to clarify for me, that when we raise, because I believe that we're going to have to, unfortunately, raise the fees, that would be on an agenda item. So Joe Brand, correct me if I'm wrong, you would need that information to print the passes, or is that something? I'm jumping ahead way too much.
You're not jumping ahead. It would have to be decided upon relatively soon, yes.
Okay. So Mr. Lupo, when would that be on an agenda item?
Sorry, I'm just thinking. I have to imagine, we could probably have it within 2 to 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
Yeah, so Joe, you don't need the price to have the passes printed, correct?
That's correct.
So it could be on the agenda item on the last meeting in, or the second meeting in April.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not sure if it can be, because if it's going to impact the budget, the council gets the budget before the second meeting of April.
Yeah.
So it would probably have to be determined at the first meeting in April.
I would
Um,
the hearing.
Because otherwise, if you put the raised fees in the budget, give us the budget on April 10th, and then the fees don't pass at the second meeting in April, the budget is all discombobulated. That's a technical term, by the way.
Now, can we do an errata sheet then?
Right, then it would
Oh,
be
you
on-
could do an errata sheet. Yeah, that's true. But
Yeah. But doesn't it have to have a hearing just as all? the-
Right.
it does.
Right.
Yeah, Donna, I think we have to authorize it in.
Then we would announce, so at the next meeting, we're announcing that we're having a hearing.
Which has to be a authorization for a public hearing. It has to be legal notice. So there's a lot of factors that have to lead up to that.
Yes, folks, it's an ordinance, not a reso.
Thank you, David.
So Dave, to raise it, do we have to public hearing, legal notice it?
Just like every other ordinance, yes.
Right. And you have a certain lead time that you need, right?
Yes.
The only other option would, well, you can't even do it at this point. I was going to say, you can't even notice it at a special meeting because, well, I guess we could. I mean, today's Tuesday. We'd have to have potentially have a special meeting just to notice it, to get it on a hearing on the calendar for the first meeting of April.
Right.
No, the first meeting of April is Tuesday.
Yeah, that's
Correct, a week from today.
Yeah.
So if we had
No.
hypothetically a special meeting on,
Errata. Remember, we're moving ahead. We are moving ahead. So, and unfortunately, this probably should have been a conversation that we had weeks ago. That's what we've been trying to do. So it will have to be on an errata because we are finalizing the budget right now. And so that's what we've been talking about. So to do something for next week, no.
well, legally, can we put increased fees in a budget if they're not passed?
You're getting the budget to review it. It's not going to the public. You're getting it to review. We can put in there the loss. And then you can come back and say, we need to raise the fees.
Yeah, we can put in a proposed budget what
Right.
we think needs to be in the beach revenue, and then if the beach passes will stay the same price, then we'll have to put that through the errata sheet.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't know what I missed while I was gone there when I got kicked off. So I don't know if you solved all the world's problems while I was gone.
We did.
We did.
We did.
Okay, good. Then we can all go on vacation.
I am.
I'm not.
Okay.
That's
So-
it.
Are we done with this?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Have
Who
a
lost
lovely
the
evening.
over under tonight?
Me. Oh, wait. McNally, do you have a question? Or are you just waving?
I lost. I was waiting.
Oh, no.
Well,
On,
yeah,
back to that.
you are
crazy
totally, yeah.
Darth Vader.
Do we need to hear from Joe Fabrizio at all? I see he's on.
No, he was just on in case we had a question.
Okay.
That's all.
I'm just
Hey,
here to
Deb.
beautify the place.
Hey, Ryan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
All right.
Night.
Thanks, everyone.